Well, if you look behind me, this is the home where Josh Phillips lived. That far right window was his bedroom, where Maddie Clifton's body was found under his bed. Just across the street is where Clifton's home was. Her sister just moved in.
When 8-year-old Maddie Clifton disappeared, an entire town sprung into action while the whole nation watched. Maddie had mysteriously vanished from her home in Jacksonville, Florida on November 3, 1998. Hundreds of volunteers joined search parties, camera crews flocked to the suburbs, and her two parents tried not to despair. Then, after a week of relentless efforts, Maddie Clifton was found bludgeoned and death under the bed of her 14-year-old neighbor. When police found her body, the neighbor first explained that he had struck Clifton in the face while playing basketball with her, then accidentally killed her when he hit her with the bat to stop her from crying.
And I remember walking in to the IHOP and seeing a missing persons poster on the window walking into the...
But the neighbor's account was only half of the Maddie Clifton story, and the truth was far more darker. The crime took place in such an unusual way that it shattered everyone, from the authorities to the citizens in the neighborhood. Nobody could believe that such a thing could actually exist and happen around them. Born on June 17, 1990 in Jacksonville, Florida, Maddie Clifton was raised at a time when parents allowed their children to roam free. The Columbine High School shooting had time to curb that lenience, and the fear of terrorism had yet to blanket a nation. Told to play outside on November 3, 1998, having no idea about what was going to happen to her, Maddie Clifton did just that. It was Tuesday when Maddie Clifton went out to play in the suburbs. Her father Steve, mother Sheila, and 11-year-old sister Jessie lived with her in the Jacksonville home. It was election day. Maddie had been at school that day, and after school, she went straight home and arrived back at the house around 4:30 p.m. At home, Maddie practiced her piano until her mother Sheila returned home from voting. As soon as Sheila was home, Maddie ran outside to play. She knew she had a short period of time to play before she needed to be home again for dinner. A lot of children played out on the street. That afternoon, Maddie went to her 16-year-old neighbor's yard to hit some golf balls. She returned to her own yard to get more golf balls. Sheila called Maddie and Jessie in for dinner at 6:20 p.m. There was no sign of Maddie in the yard, so Sheila asked her neighbors if they saw her. They helped to look for her, but she didn't appear to be anywhere on the street. Sheila called 911 to report her daughter missing at 6:30 p.m. The search for Maddie intensified, and hundreds of volunteers looked for her, but she was not found. In the days that followed, thousands of flyers were handed out. Maddie's parents appealed for information. The media covered the disappearance extensively, and police questioned neighbors. Some were questioned multiple times. The first 7 days of her disappearance were described as a circus. Non-stop search parties, police, news reporters, and missing person flyers everywhere. Everyone was set on finding Maddie alive. The National Guard was even called to walk through the sewer systems for potential leads. The world had seemingly come to halt for her family. What went from a night of playing outside turned into every mother's worst nightmare, and nobody had an idea that it was going to turn into something worse than a nightmare. On November 10, Maddie's parents had just finished taping an interview with a national news program, hoping it would result in information on Maddie's disappearance, when their neighbor Missy Phillips ran across the street to find a police officer. Phillips had led the officer to the bedroom of her 14-year-old son. Missy had been cleaning her son's room when she noticed his waterbed to be leaking onto the floor. She began checking the bed when she found the source of the leak. The leak turned out to be Maddie Clifton's body, which was entombed inside the frame. Maddie's body was found partially clothed, bludgeoned with a baseball bat multiple times. Missy Phillips had even been a part of the search parties, unaware that Maddie's body was so close inside her own house. Police drove to Missy Phillips' son, Joshua Earl Phillips School, to arrest him for the murder of Maddie Clifton.
Found Maddie Clifton this morning at about 7:30 a.m.
Joshua Phillips was born on March 17, 1984 in Allentown, Pennsylvania, but in the early 1990s, his family moved across the street from the Cliftons in Florida. His father, Steve Phillips, a computer specialist, was incredibly strict and violent towards his wife Melissa and towards Josh as well. On January 13, 1999, Maddie's autopsy was made public, revealing she died from blunt impacts to the head with skull fractures. Stab wounds to the neck may have contributed to her death, but there was no evidence of injury. On November 16, 1998, prosecutors announced that they will try Joshua as an adult and will ask a Duval County grand jury for a first-degree murder indictment, and on November 19, the grand jury indicted Phillips for first-degree murder. He was moved from the Juvenile Detention Center to the Duval County Jail, where he was held without bail to await a trial. As Joshua was arrested, he didn't take much time to confess to the murder, but in his own defensive ways. He confessed that he blended in with the rest of Maddie's searchers, although he could barely contain his harrowing secret. Only he knew where Maddie Clifton was, in his room and under his bed. According to Joshua, Maddie's murder was a bad decision that stemmed from an accident. Joshua then recalled the series of events that happened that day when Maddie disappeared. He said that Maddie had come over to ask him to play baseball with her outside. He was home alone at the time, and he agreed to Maddie's proposition. While they were playing outside, he accidentally hit a baseball in her eye. When she started to bleed, cry and scream, he panicked. Joshua said that he was worried that his father would be angry and that fear caused him to drag Maddie Clifton into his house. As he physically dragged her inside, her lower clothing came off her body. Once upstairs, he beat her with a baseball bat to get her to stop crying, and then shoved her under his bed. After that, his father did arrive home. Joshua spent the night with his family, and when he went back upstairs, he realized Maddie was still alive. At this point, he cut her with a small knife, then left her there once more. He later claimed that he was trying to ignore what he had done. "That was my defense for everything as a kid. If something was wrong, ignore it. It will go away," said Josh in his statement. But this did not simply go away though. On July 6, 1999, the trial for Maddie Clifton's murder started. Attorney Richard D. Nichols defended Joshua Phillips. Nichols' strategy was considered abnormal, as he did not call a single witness to the stand, nor did he allow Josh to testify. His whole argument hinged on his closing argument that the murder was an act that began as an accident and deteriorated through the panic that bordered on madness. State Attorney Harry Shortstein made an argument that the murder may have been motivated, even though there was no evidence of sexual assault. He pointed out some conflicting evidence and arguments, like there was no dirt on Maddie's lower body that would be consistent with Josh's story of her clothes coming off outside from being dragged. There was no blood on the baseball bat that Josh claimed hit Maddie, and this caused the panic-induced murder. There was no blood in the backyard where they were supposedly playing, and Maddie's older sister claimed that Josh would talk about sex with both her and Maddie. During the trial, the state walked the jury through the day of the murder, including computer history and records. What police found was that 30 minutes before Maddie Clifton's murder, Joshua had been using the family computer to browse hardcore and violent Although the medical examiner found no evidence of assault, Maddie Clifton's pants and underwear were also from her body. There was one piece of inadmissible evidence from the defense that many believe could have also swayed the jury. Josh had brain scans taken from a neurologist that showed he had lesions on his frontal lobe. These lesions were in a spot that could, in theory, impair his judgment and induce panic and high stress. However, the judge did not allow that evidence to be weighed in the jury's decision. The trial only lasted 2 days, and the jury came to a decision within 2 hours of deliberating. They found him guilty of first-degree murder. Joshua Phillips was sentenced to life in prison without parole, as he was too young to receive the death penalty. Currently, he is imprisoned at Taylor Annex in Perry, Florida. Since his trial, there have been multiple appeals for his case. In 2012, the Supreme Court declared sentencing juveniles to life in prison without parole is unconstitutional, which is one of the biggest factors in his upcoming resentencing trial in 2013. When Joshua began serving his sentence, the pain he inflicted on an innocent family continued. There was no closure for them despite the life sentence. Maddie's parents dealt with their grief in different ways, and they divorced after 25 years of marriage. They had been together for 30 years.
During these past few days, I've sat here in this courtroom and I have listened to all of the classes that the defendant has been able to take. What classes has Maddie been able to take over the past 18 years?
Missy's husband, Steve Phillips, died in a car crash. In 2020, having exhausted other appeals, Joshua appealed to the Supreme Court, but the Florida Supreme Court turned down Joshua's appeal. Justices declined to hear arguments in the appeal.
Here for sentencing on the case where we have, I granted back some time ago a motion to correct a legal sentence, vacating the sentence imposed on Mr. Phillips and ordering a new sentencing hearing be conducted.
I did something horrible. I am so sorry for what happened. I wish to God that I could have known this or understood this when I was 14. Had I then, none of this would have come about. I had no clue what life meant, what death meant, nor the depth of suffering that could follow one act, said Joshua in his closing statements.
I lived long enough to understand the time involved or what really suffering was. I did something horrible. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what happened. Even now, after all these years, it is just unfathomable that all this could have occurred. It tears my mind asunder to know that I stole such a precious life from you, from the world. I so wish I could take away your pain.
A psychiatrist assigned to the case claims that more weight should have been added to Joshua Phillips' background and family history. Had it been, the jury would have heard that he was abused as a child, had an abusive father, and had a mother dealing with extreme depression. The state of Florida claims that Joshua Phillips deserves to stay in prison at least for another 25 years.
And it always puts me in a mindset where it's like, not always, but a lot of times I end up going like, all right, well, maybe I did deserve to be here. Maybe I deserve too much time. Maybe I deserve to die in prison.
What do you guys think about these contradictory arguments? And whom do you agree with? There's no doubt that Joshua Phillips killed Maddie Clifton. But why did he kill her? And should his young age, brain lesions, and prison behavior be taken into account for his 2023 resentencing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit that like button, share this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon to never miss an update on more such unbelievably twisted cases.